Are you able to?
Yep.
I'll go on.
Oh, host disabled screen sharing, it says. So
Let me see. Try now.
I'm not.
It says everybody.
Weird system preferences. Hi, Renee.
We have multiple participants can share simultaneously. All participants can share. Those are all clicked. So you should be able to.
Okay, let's try this one more time. Here we go.
All right.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to my office hours. I'll try to get through the slide part kind of quick and get to questions. And but if along the way anyone has any questions or wants to join the conversation, please feel free. Obviously, a lot going on in social media that would require way more than a half-hour conversation to really touch on everything. But today we're going to focus really on engaging with your consumers and kind of what that means for your overall social media mix and how to get a little more out of what you're doing. Quick about me, the former VP of marketing at Digital Trends. Prior to that, I was the founder and media director of Goose Down Media here back in Portland. I was a consultant for a time in the integrated marketing, kind of the sales strategy side for both Viacom and Univision. And I was in charge of advertising for Ubisoft before that. Really, again, I want to look at where we are with social media usage. As you can see, the minutes per day are just way up as everyone is home and kind of logged on permanently as they work from home with no repercussions of their boss kind of walking in and seeing what they're doing. And I think what this speaks to with the use of social media, right, is in addition to the quarantine, there's an election happening. Social media is it's how most Americans get their news now. So daily news about the pandemic, the election, any stuff that's breaking, and obviously with everything that's going on in the world, there's just a lot more news, so a lot more people are on there. What we're seeing from Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, Twitch over the weekend, all of these talks of like banning or being a lot more vigilant about banning kind of hate speech and everything that unlocks. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of major advertisers migrate away from Facebook. And then just something interesting like Reddit banned their subreddit, The Donald. I don't know if anyone saw that, but it's a huge step towards kind of policing the conversations that are taking place on social media. Agnostic of politics, I think we all have to understand that, the companies that are making these decisions, it's largely to appease advertisers, and they want to make sure that they're creating platforms that, appeal to the kind of lowest common denominator, the highest number of people can go and feel good about it, and that the social platforms are able to monetize that content. Reddit in particular, you're going to see a lot in the news as they make a big push to monetize their 330 million unique users a month. And then just something interesting that happened over the weekend in Fortnite, they had their first kind of what they called a drive-in movie, and millions of people joined the game, used their online avatars to watch Inception together over the weekend. So I think you're going to see, as live events can't happen, more and more of these virtual events on Twitch and Fortnite are going to take place. So when we talk about all of this from a community aspect, really what we want to know is, what does that mean when people talk about engagement? It's such a word. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And I just want to make sure we're all kind of using the same glossary there. We'll talk about how to develop your audience, creating content, community managers, who's at the helm of your social media, posting content, and then we'll get into LinkedIn and Reddit a little more if we have some time, two of my favorite platforms for business. So engagement. When we talk about engagement, what that really means is anything like that we would call a meaningful social interaction. That can be a like, a comment, a share, a click, a retweet, and really more and more what the platforms are looking at is this VCR, video completion rate. So video, understand the algorithm and the company priorities, video is the number one medium that all of these platforms are pushing. They get the highest CPMs for it on in terms of advertising. It's the stickiest in terms of what keeps an individual user on a given platform for the longest amount of time. So it should be an important part of your social media mix, but again, there's a lot of rules that come with it for making sure that with everything on social media, there's kind of this catch-22 of what they say, the algorithm, this phantom algorithm. It can either hurt you or help you, and you have to just stay abreast of what's going on. And I think the biggest misconception as I work with consulting clients right now, developing content and content distribution strategies, is I often hear, well, we've got 3 million users, so we're going to show them this video and hopefully it'll go viral or whatever. And it's not the case. Almost every social platform has really de-emphasized that size of following, that subscriber count, essentially. And once you get above a certain level, every single one of these platforms, except for Twitch, of course, which is all live, what they do is you put a post up and they'll immediately show that to 1,000 of your most active users. And whether you have 1.8 million, 5 million, whatever, that number doesn't really change of who they are going to show that post to right away, right? And then it's really based on that immediate MSI, that immediate meaningful social interaction. That opens up that post to more and more initially of your following. And then when you cross a certain threshold, they'll start to feed it to non-followers that have similar likes and interests. So the number one, the number two mistake, the number one mistake is thinking that when you put a post out, your following is seeing it. The number two mistake we see is that people put something up and they leave it there and they, think, oh, that either worked or it didn't work. Like, we'll get them next time. And it's not. You have to get that immediate MSI. So when you put something up, you have to know within the first half hour, 3 hours, whether or not that post is successful for you. So what that means is the thumbnail, the headline, all of that stuff, you've got to have multiple versions ready to go so that you can kind of test what's working. And all of this, again, is predicated on kind of knowing who that audience is and what they're going to respond to, and really being ready when you put something up, seeing if it takes off, and then who it's taking off with, so that you can really kind of amplify that based on, on what's working. And I think, and the other thing that happens is as you get these meaningful social interactions, like comments, shares, clicks, like what that creates, that halo effect. So if I comment on Kelly Blake's post on LinkedIn, now my followers are going to see that I've commented on that. That's that halo effect. So again, I can't stress that enough, is that when you put something up, half hour, 3 hours, make those edits, A/B test, put different things up. Don't be afraid to tinker. Social media is really a living, fluid kind of content platform, right? The other thing I think that we see all the time is this idea that, like, oh, we're going to put this up on social media and people will click over to either another social media platform or back to our website. And it's just not the case. Remember, again, like Facebook makes money by keeping you on Facebook. YouTube makes money by keeping you on YouTube. They have absolutely no incentive for you to click from one social platform to another, right? So if you're using social media to drive traffic, like you're barking up the wrong tree. That's an SEO issue. Social platforms are, for the most part, self-contained. When you get into the paid, then you can start to up that spend, that cost per click, to get people over there. And it's the same thing. Like if you want to drive action, it's that paid, particularly a click away from the social platform. That's where that paid, whether you call it performance marketing, growth marketing, user acquisition, lead gen, whatever you want to call it, like that paid. Think about when you're on Instagram, right? The difference between one of those direct to consumer ads that comes up and you can just swipe and you don't leave your place in Instagram to kind of do your shopping or see what you want to see, versus when someone writes, in an organic post like link in bio. Well, now that's 3 or 4 more steps I have to take to get that information. And, most users are not going to do that. They need that immediate thing and they don't want to get off the platform they're on. So when we talk about audience, the other thing I'm seeing a lot of right now is this idea, of who are we talking to on Instagram? And I just go back to this quote for kind of all marketing, but I see it on social media in terms of engagement the most, is this idea that Herb Kelleher from Southwest Airlines once famously said, you have to treat your staff like customers. And I think it's most prevalent on social media, right? Let's say you have 100 employees, that's 100 evangelists, 100 community managers you should be creating by, you want to give them things to post, make them proud of their workplace. So give them the tools to post it. Everyone's on Slack now at Digital Trends. When we had a big piece of news that we wanted pushed out socially, we would create the tweet or the Instagram post or the Facebook post for the staff, ask them to cut and paste it on, the social platform of their choice, and really give them evangelists. We'd also try to include the staff in as many kind of posts as we could. Again, empower them to take pride in their workplace and what they're doing. And I think the other side of that is, the flip side of that coin is Herb Kelleher also said, like, we spend so much money on advertising because we are setting the expectations for our employees. So it's a double-edged sword. Yes, your staff is your core audience on social media, but you want to make sure you are setting the bar of what's expected of them, kind of behavior wise, content wise. I think you're seeing it right now. Just this weekend, a good friend of mine called me because one of the lawyers in his firm made a comment that was not so sensitive to a social post and wanted to know how to kind of deal with that. And again, it was like, well, what's the precedent that's been set, and what are the rules about people posting on social media, relative to their relationship to the company. It just takes no effort right now if someone does something online to figure out kind of where they live, where they work, all of this stuff. And you want to make sure that your employees are reflecting, your attitudes and values online. Then it's second, you want to talk about your core consumer. Again, who your core consumer is. I think one of the things that happens on social media, especially now, is you've got a lot of people talking and asking, what are you doing about this? Or what's the policy of this? And I think it's really easy to start chasing your tail with every comment, every whatever. You really got to make sure you know who you're talking to online, who matters, who the core customer really is, so that you can say, like, hey, this is what we're about, and kind of stay the course without having to, constantly rethink it. And then everyone else comes after that staff and core customer, right? Your social media does have this lowest common denominator effect to it. But again, don't get caught up in all of that. And then again, I can't stress enough, really, it's that use of paid growth marketing that's allow you to build a really active, vibrant, and true consumer base. I think we saw in the late aughts, just a lot of people just chasing that follower count for the sake of it. And you got a lot of like bots and really crummy people. And again, like that will hurt you if you have this active user base, but the platforms see that, you know, no one actually ever engages with your content. So pay a little more, create loyalists, and, you know, and get that audience that you know is actually reflective of who your core consumer is. Content wise, really it's about the right content in the right place. Like there is a conversation happening that is endemic to each social platform. Make sure you know what you're doing. Don't just create one post, spray it all over the place, and then you know, just keep posting the same marketing collateral everywhere. It's like there is a conversation taking place, and that engagement part, that means answering questions, asking questions, responding to comments, and really tailoring what you're creating to you know, what's happening. But I think, you know, where we're seeing a lot of brands get in trouble these days is, you know, you can't just talk. Like what you post on social media really has to be a mirror, an authentic reflection of the values and culture of your company. And especially, and to go back to the audience, if you're using your staff, how is my staff going to react to this post? That's kind of a great litmus test for, you know, they're going to let you know if they think what you're creating is an authentic reflection of the values and culture. So that's a great little checks and balances. If you feel like, well, how's the staff going to react when we put this up? If, you know, if you're sitting there thinking like, oh, they're going to call bullshit on us, well, probably not worth posting, right? Another question I always get is it okay to use an outside source? Yeah, absolutely. If there is a great article or video or piece of content, or everyone in your office is excited to go see Star Wars, like that's okay to put that out there as well with your own kind of filter on it, right? And then the cadence, right? Like I see this a lot too, particularly with smaller businesses. They just don't post enough. And again, when you think about how those algorithms work, where they're going to constantly say like, oh, you know, Greg posts pretty frequently. He always gets 1,000 views on this stuff. Like you're going to start to earn that trust of the algorithm, where the more you post, the bigger section of your following they'll release it to. And, you know, you can start to get a little more predictive with your results. When you're not posting enough, you're not putting enough anything behind anything, it's really hard to tell like what's working and what isn't. So, you know, most people, when I get in and I ask them, you know, how frequently, you know, more often than not, the answer is like, you could be posting more and you could be okay. Just for reference, at Digital Trends, you know, we were creating about across all social platforms close to 200 posts a day. Now, mind you, that's a little extreme because we're a news organization putting out 50, 60 stories a day. But at the same time, it's just reflective of like, you're okay with a little more out there. And then, you know, something else to think about with the content, right? What we always say is like these first date vibes. Like people use social media, they want to show this best version of themselves. And so give them content that they can borrow equity from. Hey, if you're a B2B organization, you know, and you've got a product meant to help salespeople, here's a great article. It doesn't have to be from you about the sales process, right? Then a seller is very likely to take that, you know, comment on it, share it, distribute it, because they want to be seen as a leader in their field, right? And you're going to give them that content to do it. So think of that as well. Like, hey, is this something that, again, my core customer, who I know very well, or my staff, Is it something that they'd be willing to post or share, whatever? People that, you know, like that shared post, when we talk about that meaningful social interaction, someone taking your content and sharing it out kind of as their own, I mean, that's the ultimate compliment. So, and then the last thing where I just see people kind of missing the point here is community managers, right? Like every organization has what they call a social media manager or head of social, whatever. And that job's become largely very performance marketing oriented, very analytical. And I think we just need to go back to when I was in the video game industry back in the day before social media. You know, the most important people in the company in a lot of ways were the community managers. They were hardcore gamers, fans of our games that we would recruit, and they would become our admins, posting in forums, going to events, doing demos. And they really they became the face of the brand in a lot of ways to the most hardcore users we had. So really high risk, really low reward, right? Like it's a, you know, there's very few companies out there right now, like where any of us would say like, oh, I love what they're doing on social media. Like, oh, Procter and Gamble's social media presence is really adding value, right? But wait, that one mistweet from the Procter and Gamble social media manager, like, and the havoc they can wreak on your brand and business, right? So these are brand stewards that you're entrusting with a huge amount of responsibility. And very often they're college, like right out of college kids that we're hiring, and we're just not giving enough training to, not taking them through all the scenarios they're going to be faced with. So really it's invest in these community managers, pay a little more there, make sure you've got somebody that, you know, you would have no problem putting up at a public speaking engagement, or you know, sit like talking to the CEO of another company or whatever, because that's what you're essentially asking them to do. And, you know, the other thing that I think gets missed with the community manager is that's a two-way conversation, right? You're asking them to talk to your consumers, but a big part of how we use the community managers in the video game industry was they would also give us feedback directly to the game creators and the marketing leaders about what they were seeing. So for example, we had this SWAT game, Rainbow Six, there was a glitch that no one had found in the process. And it was, you know, it came to our attention through, you know, the game forums. And, you know, a community manager, a pretty young person, had to get before some really accomplished game makers and kind of take them through what was happening, and, you know, have the game creator you know, take that feedback and alter a, you know, really big project. So again, they're an endless source of great feedback for them, but we have to trust them, and you have to put someone in that position that can actually kind of handle that responsibility. That's really it in terms of my overall community engagement. I've got a little bit about LinkedIn and Reddit that I want to talk about, but if anyone has any questions, comments, I think I went a little long, so I can hold off on this if anyone else wants to talk. Okay. No, or you just can't get to your mute buttons fast enough. All right. You're still muted.
There's a question in there about, can we talk about content?
Yes. What is the question about content?
It says sensitive time. I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Hey, Pete, it's Kelly. Can you hear me? I'm sorry,
yes.
my audio has been funky.
No
I have some questions around content and
yes.
advising a client. In the last 3 months, obviously a lot of things going on in the world, COVID,
yes.
Black Lives Matter, politics, et cetera, et cetera. And I have a client that's a CPG, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sales, product is the ultimate goal. And continue to talk about them being authentic to who they really are, you know, as a brand, and the way they communicate to their consumers. But it's such a funky time, and it's been really challenging as far as creating what that content looks like and being so sensitive. to this ever-changing landscape. So how do you sort of counsel on what content should look like during this time? It's not normal.
It's really not. I mean, it's a great question. I think one of it, the first question is kind of this like, why am I talking? So this idea of creating kind of socially relevant content, I think comes back to, is this a brand with something new to offer or something relevant to offer, right? So in that case where we've seen a lot of brands get in trouble, right? We're not even in trouble, but a less innocuous or a more innocuous version is at the beginning of the kind of COVID quarantine. You saw a lot of brands sending out emails or social posts talking about like their commitment to safety and there was a pretty instant backlash because it's like, hey, Burger King, I don't really need to know this, or I don't really care so much as I would love to know like what you're doing for your employees or something like that. So I think that's a big part. Like if it's a consumer packaged goods brand, it's like, okay, do they really have a relevant part of this conversation? And then I think the big thing is like back to the idea of the audience is like, would your own staff agree with you? My former company has spent a lot of time in the news in the last couple of weeks because they made some posts that some other employees didn't feel like were truly reflective of the work environment that they were in. So I think that's the other part of it is like, hey, we want to say something because we feel like we should. But I think that conversation has to start with like, hey, what are we doing kind of internally to address this with the people that matter to us most? And then you can start to think about like, how do you want to message that? So yeah, I would just say like, what is your client doing that's like adding to the conversation that they could post about? And if they're not, I would say it's also okay to not say anything. Like, again, back to that high risk, high reward. It's okay to not be a part of every single conversation if you really don't have anything kind of specific to add to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the direction it's gone in, is because they don't really have much to add to it, but then it just feels weird when you're sort of posting as usual, right? So it's sort of stuck in the middle.
It's a little bit stuck in the middle, and I would say the posting as usual, I think, is okay, with a little bit of just like someone's got to have like, I would say now would not be the time to just schedule things for days in advance, but get back to like that manual posting and just be sensitive. I think what we're seeing is kind of where people post is also a big part of it. Like, so if you're on LinkedIn, for example, like probably fine to just go about business as usual. Whereas, some other places are a little more kind of, social in that regard. Any more questions? Okay.
That was great.
Well, we're right at our half hour, so I'll let everyone get going. If you want to talk LinkedIn and really Reddit, happy to have those conversations. And yeah, thanks, Kara, for all your help.
Pete, we should really thank Ruthie. I just started a Zoom and she's much better at running these than I am. So thanks for being an EIR. We appreciate it. And enjoy your time capsule vacation.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, KB. I'll talk to you later.
All right, everyone, have a great day and a wonderful short week and a nice long weekend.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks,
Take
Pete.
care.